listening to the 23 Personnel Podcast, a Texas Tech athletics podcast where food and sports clash at the goal line. Here are your hosts, Spencer and Michael.
All right, what is up, everybody? Welcome back to the episode of the 23 Personnel Podcast. This is going to be a special edition, extra edition of the 23 Personnel Podcast this week. I'm your host, Spencer, joined this time by Trevor of Saturday's Warrior. Trevor, what's going on, man?
How's it going? Yeah, I've never been introduced as Michael from the 23 Personnel Podcast before, but I don't think anyone will mistake me for him. So, no, I'm doing great. A little anxious as we've had 2 weeks to, with the bye week, to sit here and stew on this upcoming matchup. So ready. While I'm anxious for it, I'm also just ready for it to come.
Yeah. So as things tend to evolve throughout the season when things are going well, I mentioned this on a regular show. Last season, I think we had 0 requests for crossover episodes and special previews. And this will be the 3rd extra show we've done in 3 weeks. And I've got one more on the docket for the big college huddle network tomorrow night with Eric. So looking forward to that. We'll be sure to share that one out as well. But I couldn't be happier to give up, a little extra time this week to continue talking about Texas Tech football and BYU as we get ready for what's probably unquestionably one of Texas Tech's biggest games of the recent history here. I know there's going to be a lot of comparisons that you may hear going back to 2008. Essentially the last time that Texas Tech was any good in football. Following that, 2009 was a decently good season, but that ended with Mike Leach being fired. And then, we had the decade of suck with Tommy Tuberville and Cliff Kingsbury, who was a great Red Raider and a great coach, but not at the right time. And then a poorly fitting Matt Wells, who lasted 2.5 seasons until we got to Joey McGuire. And then that's just been, the monster that's been building and momentum rolling. I say all that to say, we're welcoming in an 8-0 undefeated BYU team. And between the two teams, it's 17-1 on the season, or 19-2 for BYU going back, or 19-2, whatever it is, over the past 2 years. So obviously it's a big time matchup, something that we're still getting our minds around, trying to see how we can just enjoy the moment. But I want to talk about BYU first. And from our perspective, and maybe this is just, because we're not, diving in and watching the Cougars play every week. And it seems like while BYU is 8-0 and undefeated, there have been some games where it hasn't been pretty. It's been closer than probably what many people would have expected. Obviously, they've won everything, every game they played in. So from an outsider, it would seem like some games have not gone as well as what one would be expected. From your view, Trevor, how would you sum up their season so far? What's going well, and what's still kind of holding them back?
I mean, BYU at this point for this season has exceeded, I think, even the most optimistic BYU fans' expectations coming into the season, especially after losing starting quarterback Jake Retzloff. So I'll say, after last season, expectations were high for this team, bringing back a lot of guys who we expect to have a real shot at the NFL, and coming back one more year. And then when you lose a starting quarterback, obviously the most important piece, even though you have a full team to win, that is obviously the most important piece of a team as you move forward. And to lose that guy, even though he was a little bit erratic, he was somebody we knew, we loved, and we felt like his spirit, his competitiveness helped run that engine for the BYU team. And then he leaves. We end up starting a true freshman, which we're all ecstatic about, but not completely sure what we're going to get with this guy. and he has just continued to impress every week. And it's crazy the way BYU's schedule has gone this season. It's almost gone like every game sequentially has gotten more difficult than the next, or than the previous one. And he just continues to elevate his game every week. And we find ourselves in, as you mentioned, some games and some tough scenarios, like having to go to overtime against Arizona in weird weather conditions, being down by multiple scores at Iowa State, and being able to come back and have a convincing win, even after losing a key piece in our offense. And so it's, again, there have been new challenges every week, and this team has continued to find a way to win. And I agree, it's not always as flashy, not as sexy as some other teams out there, like a Texas Tech, that can just put up points and blow people out. But I think winning is its own skill. Like, it is difficult to win football games, and BYU knows how to. And there's that, I know it gets overused, but this complementary football where every phase really feeds off of each other, and BYU just knows how to gut it out. And they've got this other mindset. And I would just say, like, yeah, some people chalk it up to luck. You're going to have a regression to the mean. But as you pointed out, BYU at this point has lost 2 games over the last 2 seasons. And that at some point it stops being luck, and it's just BYU creating its own luck. And so, having said all that, this is definitely BYU's toughest test to date. I think between even last year and this year, this will be the toughest test. And so we're going to learn a lot about both these teams going into this game, and I'm really excited for it.
Yeah, so let's talk about BYU going on the road. We talked about, y'all playing at Colorado, at Arizona, and then at Iowa State. It was a 3-point margin there, at Colorado, a team that I think at this point in the season, you can pretty much, say that they packed it in, and they're not really competitive right now. But that probably wasn't the case back in September because of Colorado not being on our schedule this year. Like, I've not given them a whole lot of attention. Same with Arizona. Like, we knew that, like, losing Tedero McMillan was going to be a huge hit to their offense. And then how are they going to respond after last season when they had such high expectations coming into the season, and then to do what they did last year and to underperform in that fashion? How are they going to bounce back? And at times have looked, pretty good. Definitely improved over last season. And I'm going to skip over Utah because it's just its own monster. But then you went on the road to Iowa State this past, your last game. And as a road underdog, you got down to Iowa State. And then were able to claw back in there, and then able to do that without LJ Martin. So, like, there were times when, like, y'all have not played as well on the road. There've been closer games. Is that something that's like a part of this team this year, or just a concern that's kind of crept in, or is it just this season that, like, obviously, yes, you're winning games, but, like, you're not performing at, like, the highest level on the road? Like, is that something to be concerned about with this team this season?
I don't know if it's so much to do with on the road. I mean, BYU's only had so many major opponents at home. I mean, there was Utah, as you said, it was kind of its own animal, but really at home, they've only had Portland State. Let me see if I get this right. And Stanford to start the season, but then in conference you have West Virginia and Utah. So, I mean, it's a small sample size. I don't think so. So I was actually at the East Carolina game, watched them live, and I think it holds up too. And the games we've watched there's only been maybe 1 quarter of football that I've seen Bear Bachmeier look rattled at all. And I'm trying to think back. It was early in the season. What game was it? Was it Colorado? Anyway, it was like a quarter where he looked a little bit stunned and took a little bit, but then by the second quarter, he settled in and just, running the offense again. And so I don't know, like Jack Trice Stadium, that place was electric. That was a crazy environment. And he was, I think he was put in the toughest situation yet. You already mentioned LJ Martin goes down, changing the game plan and having to really put almost all the offense on himself between the run game and the passing game, and to dig yourself out of a hole and then to come back to win by 2 scores is just an incredible feat. So, will it be a tough environment? Absolutely. Is it going to impact the game? Yeah, I'm sure it will. But is it going to be something that BYU hasn't seen before, won't be able to overcome? I mean, it's yet to be seen. If this had been a night game, do you think that makes a difference versus, 11 o'clock local time?
I think so. Yeah. Again, it's been a long time since Texas Tech has had this kind of energy around the program. I think closest, even though record wise wasn't really a thing. It was last season when we hosted Colorado there towards the end. At that point, Texas Tech still had an outside shot to be playing themselves into conference title game contention. But ran up against a very hot Colorado team, and a very confident, I'll say, Colorado team. And obviously they were good enough to come in and play very well and defeat Texas Tech. Before that, there have been times when games were individual matchups were interesting and had some fire behind it, but not the build up of a whole season, or everybody's going to point back to 2008 just because of the similarities and record. Although 2008 you lost your first game in Norman, you were 10-0 at that point. So yeah, I think had this game been scheduled for the 6 o'clock kick or 7 o'clock kick, it would have been quite a bit different. But we've seen how networks kind of are manipulating matchup times and kickoff times to best fit viewership numbers. And for whatever reason, this 11 o'clock slot for ABC has been their hardest hitting spot, which I think is kind of funny because when Fox rolled out and said, "Hey, we're going to put our primetime slot at 11 a.m." I was like, "That's cute." It's funny. And now ABC's like, that's actually where most of our viewers are, that 11 a.m. slot. So you don't get the whole day, ramp up, and then playing at night. I do think just with the nature of our fan base having, looking for a time to get excited to go all in on something, a few hours difference in kickoff is not going to make that big of a difference in the environment within the stadium. I'm sure you've seen it. We've had lots of students already starting to camp out to get into the game. And that'll obviously only continue to push into some momentum. Secondary market tickets are going for $400 and $500 a piece. So it's a very hot commodity item to get into the game. It's expected. I assume it's been sold out for weeks at this point. So yeah, it's going to be full. It's going to be raucous. A few hours difference, maybe, but for sure. It's going to be just a different environment than what I can remember seeing. Yes, it was crazy last year when we hosted Colorado, but I don't think we would have seen anything like this for quite some time. So I don't know if you want to talk about Bear Bachmeier next, or you want to talk about the injuries. You mentioned just a second ago with Iowa State. LJ Martin goes down early, and y'all have had the bye week. You've also been, without Jack Kelly, your linebacker. I did hear from Coach Satake that both are practicing and progressing, and it was a positive in that they weren't already considered out. But, then again, I think a more recent update we saw was that, Martin was practicing and was now expected to play this weekend. So what are the vibes around both of those guys and how they're progressing back to potentially playing this weekend? If Martin goes, is he going to be limited at all? Without him, is that going to be a huge blow to the offense? And same thing with Kelly. Like how much do these guys factor into the game plan of the offense and defense performing at their top if they're missing some of their key guys?
Yeah, I mean, I don't want to sound like I'm making excuses for BYU because every team at this point in the season is banged up. Every team is missing key guys. But for the way this impacts these guys you mentioned, from what I understand, they are ready to play. We desperately needed this bye week, and so hopefully these guys were able to get healed up a little bit. The things that I've heard about LJ is that he's expected to play. It's not going to slow him down. My personal concern is even if he can play, even if he can't do more damage or whatever, if there's pain there, does that cause him to shy away from contact a little bit? And now he's a guy that he's not necessarily a speed demon. He is a guy that can bowl you over. He will break through, and he feeds off of the contact. Also great at setting blocks and the way they use him in the pass game as well. And so I do worry if he gets out there and starts taking a few hits, if he starts maybe shying away from contact, and then I think that will impact how effective he can be, even if he's on the field playing. So that is a real concern. But I don't know what the team is seeing specifically there, but obviously they feel good about him playing. And the problem with LJ and our run game, and we knew this coming into the season, is LJ's had health concerns in his past 2 seasons, and we're a little bit we lost some depth this year at running back. One guy to the portal, although he wasn't seeing a lot of playing time. Another guy is out for the season. We'll see if he comes back. It's probably, my guess is an honor code issue. He was kind of our third stringer, our second stringer got injured, and another guy we're hoping to get a waiver. He did not, and so it just after a while you don't have a lot of depth, and we have younger guys who are stepping in to do some nice things, but they don't have quite the same level of experience, which means that a lot of that has been heaped on the shoulders of Bear Bachmeier, and he's been very effective. He's been great at it, but how many hits, even if you have a guy that's built like Bear Bachmeier, built but like a fullback in there, and also loves the contact, you don't want your quarterback taking that many hits. And so that is a concern about that. And then obviously if you don't run, then that makes your team one-dimensional. One guy you didn't mention is that we do have JoJo Phillips, who was kind of expected to be our number 2 wide receiver this year, got injured early in the season. He'll be coming back. Now I expect he'll be rusty, so we'll see, how long it takes him to get up to game speed or how many snaps he takes. But that's welcome news. And then going to Jack Kelly, he and Isaiah Glasker. I mean, when healthy, this tandem of linebackers got to be the best duo in all of college football. If not, both are very likely to be drafted on, to go play it in the NFL. But both have been banged up. Most notably Jack Kelly, who missed a game, and it's shown a little bit. Obviously, they're still holding down the fort, and we've got other guys that have been filling in nicely. But I think for us to continue to have long-term sustained success, especially when looking at the postseason, we need these guys and we need them to be healthy. Because when they are, they help create chaos. They help create turnovers. They help just really put that extra level of pressure on the opposing team's offense. And so without them, we still have a very good defense. There's a lot of other guys that are doing great things, but with them, it just is really when the defense is at its peak.
Yeah, I'm interested to hear that you talk about Jack Kelly and Isaiah Glasgow being a great linebacking duo. I mean, we've been what's the phrase I'm looking for? Spoiled with the linebacker play in Lubbock the past few years with Jacob Rodriguez and Ben Roberts. Rodriguez is just otherworldly in this moment. But all three of the linebackers, and I consider John Curry a linebacker. He plays a linebacker defensive back hybrid type of position. He's a linebacker by training. Only moved out there because of an injury concern, but also because he was doing so well. But wasn't going to crack knocking one of those other two guys out of their spots, but he was too good to leave on the sideline. So hey, we're going to cross train you into this hybrid safety role to get you on the field too. And the three of them are just phenomenal players. And I ranted and raved about it this past weekend in the Kansas State game. That scoop and score that we had to basically put the game away. We had we're chasing Avery Johnson out of the pocket with Romello Height. He causes the fumble. And then you look up and literally all three of the linebackers are right there. Any one of them were in position to pick up that ball and to run it in. And it just happened to be John Curry at that moment. Ben Roberts had the game sealing interception there on the next drive. And then you saw early on in the game with just the way that Jacob Rodriguez forces fumbles. He forced that one, recovered by the safety. The safety picks the ball up, runs it back to Rodriguez. Hey man, this is your ball type thing. So it just made me think back there are great linebackers all around the conference, but it made me kind of smile a little bit when you said that Kelly and Glasgow were potentially some of the best in the country. It's like, we've got a couple of really good ones too. So I want to talk about Bachmeier for a second. One, it's interesting. You guys had Stanford on your schedule. Bachmeier for BYU and David Bailey for Texas Tech would not be where they are without the Stanford issues, back in the spring, right? We had our roster kind of set. We were ready to go. Coming out of 2024, one of the biggest things that we wanted to address in the transfer portal was creating a pass rush. And we did that. We had a bunch of, the defensive line that we signed through the portal. And then the pass rush specialist that we were super excited about was Romello Height out of Georgia Tech. We were super excited that he was going to be the number one guy. And then April rolls along and David Bailey falls in our lap. We're like, what are we going to do with two of these guys? Now Bailey is a 1-year guy, whereas Bachmeier is going to have, several years, potentially, 3 more. So our lockdown guy says, as good as Bailey is for the Red Raiders, BYU may have made out on the better end of this because they get Bachmeier for potentially 4 years when we only get Bailey for 1. But he's been unbelievable and is this true freshman season. Tell us a little bit about how he's looked so far. We see highlights, but what is the Bear Bachmeier experience look like game to game or even within the game? And how has he kind of progressed so far through this season?
Yeah, so Bear is, the number one word that I think I hear all over the place that comes to mind is just poise, right? He's a freshman coming out in these new situations, and he just continues to answer the call. And he hasn't even turned it over much. And when he finally turned it over, what game was it? He had a couple turnovers, and he followed up both turnovers with incredible passes for just big gains. And so it just shows he wasn't getting shaken. He went back, he regrouped and came out and did what he had to. And so he just continues to find ways. He doesn't seem to get shaken. No moment seems too big for him. And he's not, so he can throw. We saw that against Iowa State. He can. They've slowly opened up more and more of the playbook to him. Again, you just mentioned he was at Stanford for spring practice, so he had a short time. in fall camp, and a couple weeks of that were spent, splitting reps between two other guys, trying to figure out who was going to be the starter. And so our schedule was set up really nicely to help ramp him up and get him up to speed and continually build on what on what they were doing with him in the offense, and just get him more and more comfortable out there. So we've seen that now that he can win it passing, but he's done a lot running, and he's not gonna blow by anybody. But he wears the number 47 for a reason, and that is to remind himself, that he plays like a linebacker, and he loves that, and almost too much, because you don't want him getting hurt, taking too many hits. But he just continues to find a way, and he has obviously the fan base, he has the nation, but most importantly, he has the team behind him and rallying behind him, and so it's super awesome. His numbers won't necessarily completely blow you away, but I have seen people breaking it down, and with his numbers side by side with Diego Pavia and some of these other top Heisman candidate type quarterbacks in college football, and his numbers are right there with them. Now, I'm under no illusion that Bear Bachmeier is going to be a legitimate Heisman contender this year. I think it'll take, coming out and having a huge game against Texas Tech, really impressing, obviously could change that narrative. But I do think I think it's worth noting, though, that he's right there with these guys with what he's doing. And one different stat where he's definitely beating these other guys right now is that he's 8-0, and those other teams are not. So we'd like to keep that rolling, obviously, but he's got his biggest task ahead of him this week. So we'll see. But again, I think regardless of what happens, BYU win or lose, I don't see a loss, coming down to, this freshman quarterback, the moment was too big, or he was rattled playing in this place. I just think Bear is not going to be the reason. If BYU loses, he's not going to be the reason why.
Okay. So with that, kind of putting all this together, what are your thoughts on some of the biggest keys for BYU to win this game? What do you think it's going to take? Because from our side, we've Texas Tech has faced mobile quarterbacks, and guys like Avery Johnson have had some success, but then we've seen specifically in this past game, there wasn't much else that was there offensively for Johnson, so it was all on Johnson. And then into the fourth quarter, he was wearing down, he was getting tired. His accuracy started to go. He was then getting caught from behind, whereas he started the game by outrunning guys. We've also been, we faced Sam Levitt, and he ate our lunch. Mobile quarterbacks have always had, been a demon to the Texas Tech defense. It did seem like it was kind of contained a little bit. Avery Johnson finished with something like 85 total yards on the day, and 45 of those came on one run. I don't know why I was keying in so much on Bear Bachmeier running. That's not the only thing about this game. I think the Texas Tech rush defense, that's probably the strongest point of the Texas Tech defense, the front seven specifically. I think for Texas Tech, if there's a chance to slow down the running game and to force more of a passing attack, whether it's because there's been limited success on the ground, or there's a lead there that BYU is trying to chase, that then it's going to revert back to the Texas Tech pass rush, which has been really good, and at least creating pressure. Yes, there have been a ton of sacks. We've also seen Texas Tech get pressure to then force turnovers or just bad throws. Hearing all that, again, from your perspective, what are some of the keys to BYU being successful this weekend?
BYU's got to step it up in every phase of the game, and every position group needs to have their best game. Because from my understanding, and I've watched some Texas Tech, not as much as I would have liked, but I've watched some. I definitely watched K-State game last week and some others. I don't think Texas Tech really has a weak spot to attack. And so that just means that you really have to perform everywhere. And fortunately, that's something BYU does well, is plays a cohesive game across all phases of the ball. And so that's something that BYU is really going to have to leverage. It's true. We'll see if LJ is, looking like LJ or not. One thing that BYU has been able to do is wear teams down, but that's definitely something that Tech has done as well. And so I think it's going to be very interesting, even though they're different styles of play. You saw like with the Utah game, just continue to wear them down, and then Tech just, because that final score of that game, while super impressive, does not truly indicate the way that game went. Like that game was much closer than that score indicated, because it just snowballed an avalanche because Texas Tech just wore Utah down over the course of that game. BYU did something similar. Now, Utah did get a late touchdown and close that game up a little bit too, but BYU had really started rolling over Utah in a similar fashion. And so the big difference is Tech wants to go a lot faster, can put up a lot of points. BYU likes to control the ball, be very methodical, and limit those number of possessions. And so if BYU is able to have sustained drives and be able to force Tech to take these longer drives, and even if ends up in scores, hopefully hold to a field goal, or slow them down to limit the number of possessions, I think that's going to be an advantage for BYU. Not that Tech can't win that way as well, but if this becomes a shootout of sorts, that is going to be, I think, advantageous to you guys, considering that is the style of play that when you guys are clicking and doing well, that is how you want to play. And that's just not BYU's game. And so we're going to see which team kind of wins in dictating the pace of this game. And I think that's going to say a lot, because again, I think shootout, bad for BYU, slower, drag it out kind of a game. I think both teams could win in that scenario, but I do like BYU to be in those scenarios and figure out how to come away with a win, do what they need to. And so that is going to be a big component of it. And it's a lot easier said than done. So it's definitely going to be a tall task, but I think there is a path there for BYU to dictate the style of play and then be able to pull out a win.
Yeah, and you said it's hard to find like a weak spot in the Texas Tech team. I think not that me saying this is going to give your coaching staff any kind of leg up or anything, but I think it's from our observation, it's been intermediate to deep passes over the middle. When you put the linebackers in a pass coverage conflict, as good of linebackers that we have, they're much better at run fits than they are at pass coverage. And then our pass coverage deep over the middle with the safeties is a little bit more susceptible than our corners. Obviously, Bryce Pollock is up there nationally in terms of interceptions, and then the PFF grades of how, or the quarterback rating when he's targeted, it's super low. The other corners have been rotating a little bit, but it's been Amir Boyd and Balfour, is the other guy I was thinking of. But yeah, so like the intermediate to deeper passing over the middle, I think is where we've been a little bit more susceptible to being beat. It happened against Utah, and then luckily or not for Texas Tech, that one explosive play got called back because of a ineligible downfield. And then you were able to kind of regroup and not allow that to happen again. And then you were targeted once like that against Houston. So it has happened. Going back to your points in the game, I think, yes, in a shootout style of game, I think I would very much heavily favor Texas Tech. I think you mentioned like the grind out type of games. Texas Tech has won that way several times this year, and you point to Utah and to Kansas State. Those games were close late. I mean, it was this past weekend it was 9 points, so barely a 2-score game with about 5 minutes to go. But in both instances, those games came down to, you were in a position to dictate what the other team had to do. You were in enough of a lead and with, as little time left that you were dictating the game plan, and then you were able to capitalize on what you forced them into doing. You forced them to throw it, then you got a lot more passing pressure, pass rush on them, and that led to turnovers, and it led to all kinds of things that helped snowball the things that the final score got out of hand in both those games, because you wore them down and you dictated what had to be done. There are other games where you won big and it wasn't ever kind of a question, but that same kind of cadence has happened at just different parts of the game. Obviously against the more deeper skilled teams that comes late in the game. But with Houston, we rolled up on them in the second quarter. We got punched back by Kansas, but then we rolled up on them on early third quarter. It's been happening fairly regularly. And in all the games, it just depending on the quality of opponent when that comes in the game. And then going back to Arizona State, it was too late into that game when Texas Tech took the lead. And then ultimately there wasn't enough fight out of Arizona State when that had happened to get that one to fall in Texas Tech's favor. And so I just wanted to ask one last question and we can wrap this one up and get to the other one. Okay, so all that, let's wrap it up. Give me your final thoughts and predictions for how this game will go and score, and we'll get you out of here.
This is always the toughest one, and I should have had this ready. I've been thinking a lot about the final score. I think, so it's going to be a tough one. Obviously, I can't pick against my Cougars. I'm going to say that they win, but it's going to be a close one. And I will say, if you're a gambling person, I know you want to see Tech go out there and steamroll BYU. That'd be great. But BYU has covered the spread. I can't remember how many, not the spread, but the, I guess the spread. They've covered every single game. I don't know how far back, or most of them. And so I'm obviously not a gambler, so I'm botching this stat. But I'm just saying they're often overlooked, and so I do think BYU is able to keep within, at the very least, keep this a close game, and so I do think they cover. But I'm going to say, I'm just trying to look at both teams' scores from the season. I think there is going to be some scoring. I think it's going to be up there, and I think BYU is going to have to be able to put up points to beat Tech as well as defense. But I'm going to say, let's see, I think there's got to be a field goal in there. So I'm going to say 27-24, which feels like a cop-out kind of score, but I feel like it's going to be something like that.
Yeah, I definitely think this is a candidate for a close game either way. When the number came out at 8.5 points on Saturday, I felt that feels like a lot of points for this game, and then it went up to 10.5. I was like, what are we seeing here? I think it may be like a projection, like they thought maybe LJ Martin was already going to be ruled out, or maybe it was just the matchup here. Texas Tech is much better at home.
It's gonna be tough,
and maybe they're projecting BYU is that they've seen some. I'd say lowered output, but they've been lower scoring games from BYU on the road. If you take out Iowa State, I guess, but if you do that, then you can just cherry pick whatever stats you want. So I don't know where that number was coming from. So initially that felt like a lot of points, even for us. Texas Tech was like a 38.5-point favorite versus Oklahoma State. And I was like, that's a lot of points to cover. And we ended up covering that because Texas Tech won 42-0. 8.5 felt like a lot. I would love for this to come. I was looking at trying to do the what is Tech score versus what is BYU defense allow, and versus what is BYU offense score versus what Tech. And it was coming up with basically like a 27-20, 27-23 type of game in favor of Texas Tech. So I started there and kind of expanded a little bit in both directions because I thought Texas Tech playing at home was going to be a little bit of a bump. It would not surprise me if this is a 2-3 point game late. And then depending on, everybody's mental state, if this is exactly where they want to be, in that position in the game to set them up to win, or if somebody's pressing because Texas Tech thought they should have ended the game, if they're struggling to put BYU away and it's frustrating them and they're starting to get out of their own game plan, or if BYU is pressing, like it can go a 1-score to a 3-score game really quickly, and the final score can be like, well, that wasn't much of a game. You're like, well, it really was until like the last 3 or 4 minutes, and Texas Tech has done that to teams. Yeah, like it felt great to just absolutely beat the brakes off of Utah and say, like, we beat them by 24 points. But it was not a 24-point lead for that game. It was 24 points at the end of the game when it mattered, but it was much closer. And same thing with Kansas State. It was 9 points there until 5 minutes left in the game. Then Texas Tech scored twice there late, really quickly. So yeah, I mean, for me, I would love it for Texas Tech to score to win by 2 scores here, and I think Texas Tech has shown they can do that. They can be a close game late. But also, we haven't played a team like BYU. Like statistically, there are some similarities to what pieces of teams have done that we've seen, but not all together. So, I mean, for the Big 12 conference, it makes it's most advantageous for Texas Tech to win this one. And I'm not saying that's what's going to happen. Yeah, it's going to have to be close to keep, not knocking BYU out of the rankings or anything. Because I think Texas Tech has a very manageable schedule to finish up the season, much more so than BYU, because you guys still have Cincinnati, which can be dangerous. I know they just got beat pretty bad against Utah.
Well, we have TCU.
How they respond to that
could be a pushover. I mean, that's a losable game as well.
Yeah, so Texas Tech finishes with UCF, who is hanging around. They did get beat pretty bad this week against Baylor, but then West Virginia did have the surprise victory over Houston. Now they forced 5 or 6 fumbles to do it. So I like Texas Tech to win this one because I think Texas Tech plays better on the road. I think the strengths of what make BYU a scary team, Texas Tech has shown they've handled that before. They don't have the pieces that Arizona State did collectively to where that one what pushed over the edge. Again, Texas Tech played without some key pieces, and they were on the road. So I like Texas Tech. It could be a close game. It's going to be electric either way. And I'm just, excited to be that we are in this part of the conversation in November, and not be like, hey, I hope we can go be a spoiler, or I just want to go have fun. No, that's not what either one of these teams are competing for at this point. And it's just been so long for Texas Tech that it's just incredible. So, and
this may be round 1 of with these.
That's true too. Yeah.
Together again.
The tiebreakers are ridiculous in this league,
and that's what we're trying to avoid. So at all costs, because that BYU got burned in the tiebreakers last year. So don't want to see that again. Fortunately, BYU controls their own destiny. Unfortunately, they've got a tough path ahead of them. So
yeah. All right, that'll do it for us here on the 23 Personnel Podcast, a special edition, extra edition this week, joined by Trevor of Saturday's Warrior. Be sure to go check out his episodes, his shows, as we get ready for the big matchup this weekend. Trevor, thanks again for joining us.
Thank you.
All right, we'll be back Saturday night for an instant reaction. Until then, we'll catch you later.
Thank you for listening to the 23 Personnel Podcast. Help us out by subscribing, rating the show, and leaving a review. Follow us on Twitter at 23 Personnel, Spencer at PuntSuck, and Michael at Michael_LBK. Be sure to catch the next episode. And until then, guns up and let the tortillas fly.